Good morning, everybody, and I'd like to call this hearing to order and thank everybody for being here. It's a busy day on Capitol Hill, as you all know. Wednesdays are exceedingly busy, and this one is no exception to that. At this hearing, we'll consider the President's nomination of Katherine Scarlett to serve as chairman of the Council on Economic Equality and Jeffrey Hall to serve as the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance at the Environmental Protection Agency. So thank you both for the willingness to serve. I want to give a special welcome to Katherine's family. Katherine, I know because she and I have worked together. Her husband Brian and her parents are here today, so thank you for joining us. And I know that Jeffrey has his parents and his wife here with him today, so thank you all for coming and being supportive. Established by the National Environment Policy Act, also known as NEPA, the Council on Environmental Quality, or CEQ as we call it, is part of the Executive Office of the President. The agency is primarily responsible for advising federal agencies on the implementation of NEPA, and as well as developing and recommending environmental policies to the President. Katherine is very well qualified to lead CEQ. In her current role as CEQ's Chief of Staff, Katherine has supported the efforts of federal agencies to implement the Bipartisan Federal Responsibility Act and ensure compliance with recent court decisions as agencies update their individual NEPA regulations and procedures. She also led efforts to modernize environmental review and permitting processes through President Trump's Permitting Technology Action Plan, recently launching the CE Explorer, which allows the easy identification of more than 2,000 categorical exclusions established by federal agencies. During the time of the first Trump administration, Katherine served in senior roles at CEQ and also at the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council. In the 4 years between her service in the executive branch, Katherine served on my staff here at EPW, playing a key role in shaping bipartisan provisions in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Economic Development Reauthorization Act, and the America's Conservation Enhancement Reauthorization Act. So thank you for that. As my colleagues know, Ranking Member Whitehouse and I are diligently working on bipartisan legislation to reform the environmental review and permitting processes for all projects. I'm hopeful we can get a bill to the President's desk for his signature. And when we do, I'm confident that it will be implemented faithfully under Katherine's leadership at CEQ. Today, we will also hear from Jeffrey Hall. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being here. President Trump's nominee to lead the EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. OECA works with EPA regional offices in partnership with state governments, tribal governments, and other federal agencies to promote regulatory compliance and enforce the nation's environmental laws and regulation. The office targets the most serious water, air, and chemical pollution violations under the laws such as the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, CERCLA, and the Toxic Substance Control Act. In carrying out the EPA's statutory authority, OECA must operate within the confines of our federal environmental laws, not invent novel violations to penalize regulated entities. The previous administration placed an outsized emphasis on penalizing regulated entities rather than working with good faith actors in the regulated community to ensure compliance. Mr. Hall will be tasked with striking the right balance between the agency's efforts to encourage compliance with our environmental laws and targeting the entities flaunting those laws to ensure Americans have clean air, clean water, and clean land. Mr. Hall's professional experience gives him the expertise to effectively lead this office. He has worked as a litigator, a prosecutor, and legal advisor representing federal agencies, corporations, and individuals in a wide variety of litigation and in both criminal and civil enforcement procedures. I look forward to hearing how Mr. Hall will navigate the agency's enforcement and compliance priorities today. So with that, I will now recognize our ranking member, Senator Whitehouse, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. As President Trump continues his unchecked parade of corruption, today we consider nominees for positions at the Environmental Protection Agency and at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. I've said before and will say again, as the EPA lays waste to long-standing science-based regulations, dismantles the agency, and otherwise betrays its commitment to the American people to protect clean air and clean water, Every single nominee for EPA merits a healthy dose of skepticism. Jeffrey Hall is being nominated for a post where the job, in theory, is to enforce the law against major polluters. In this administration, the intent seems to be to have no one policing the polluters. No accountability for polluters, no accountability for failing to keep within air or water permit limits, no accountability for even failing to get a permit in the first place. That's how you nullify a body of law, without having to go through the procedure of rolling back each permit limit or standard, or go through the legislative work of repealing the underlying statute. Crippling enforcement is the fast-track way to do President Trump's dirty work, as proposed by Project 2025, dismantling EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance, OECA. That office, in theory, works with EPA regional offices, state and tribal governments, and the Department of Justice to hold polluters accountable. OECA helped seek justice for Gulf Coast communities after BP's Deepwater Horizon disaster, secured billions for consumers after Volkswagen's Dieselgate scandal, and won cleanup, groundwater monitoring, and health exams for residents of East Palestine, Ohio, following the 2023 Norfolk Southern train derailment. When polluters flout federal pollution laws, endanger workers in fence-line communities, contaminate our air and drinking water, or dump hazardous waste, it is OECA that should work around the clock to make things right. And it is OECA that should help ensure compliance with environmental laws to prevent the worst incidents from happening in the first place. In short, whoever is leading OECA should be armed and ready with knowledge of our environmental laws, expertise to enforce them, and commitment to serving the American people. OECA should definitely not be led by someone eager to bend the knee to the biggest polluters. Mr. Hall has neither the serious nor experience, in my view, to lead OECA. His most recent law firm bio before he left for EPA mentioned environmental enforcement matters exactly 0 times. It's not clear how much he's really worked in environmental law at all. 2 of his 7 years at DOJ were in the Office of the Associate Attorney General, where he was the point of contact for the Religious Liberty Task Force during the first Trump administration. Most of his time at DOJ was spent in the Civil Division or on brief assignments to other divisions, including just 7 months in the division that works with OECA, the Environment and Natural Resources Division, or ENRD. Mr. Hall then co-founded Burke Law Group, a firm focused on defeating statutory protections meant to guarantee clean air and clean water, seeking to limit EPA's authority under the Clean Air Act, and gutting greenhouse gas regulations that protect against poisonous emissions, defending industry clients in federal and state enforcement actions. Earlier this year, Mr. Hall became acting assistant administrator of OECA and now senior advisor. The actions he has taken already suggest that he intends to make it easier for the worst polluters to pollute. He already announced that the office would, and I quote here, no longer focus on methane emissions from oil and gas facilities, and that any in-progress enforcement actions would need to go through him before proceeding, a massive handout to methane polluters. In the same memo, Mr. Hall significantly narrowed enforcement of community and water protections from coal ash storage, making it easier for coal-fueled plants, to poison our drinking water. During Mr. Hall's short tenure, EPA has already walked back at least 3 significant enforcement actions. In June 2025, EPA withdrew its lawsuit against the GEO Group, a major private prison contractor, despite previously citing over 1,000 violations of federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act violations at one of its facilities. The case had sought nearly $4 million in penalties for the improper use of a toxic disinfectant, which had in some cases evidently been sprayed directly on detainees. Guess what? GEO is a major Trump donor, contributing directly and through affiliates at least $1 million to Trump-aligned super PACs, and had formerly retained current Attorney General Pam Bondi as its registered lobbyist. In March 2025, a week before trial was scheduled to begin, EPA dismissed a Clean Air Act lawsuit against Denka Performance Elastomer, a neoprene manufacturing facility in Louisiana's Cancer Alley. Mr. Hall and the Trump administration dismissed the case, evidently because combating cancer-causing emissions in poor communities constitutes, quote, radical DEI. And more recently, EPA attempted to unwind a $150 million settlement for a Passaic River Superfund cleanup, though a federal judge put a stop to those shenanigans. The settlement, which was negotiated for a decade, was entered over the objection of the two largest polluters at the site, including Occidental Petroleum Company, one of a handful of oil and gas companies present at a Mar-a-Lago meeting where then-candidate Trump offered the fossil fuel industry favors in administrative and regulatory policies in exchange for campaign cash. Mr. Hall's actions are particularly troubling in view of EPA's planned cuts to and reorganization of OECA. According to EPA's FY26 budget request, the administration is seeking to cut its budget for criminal enforcement by 49%, for civil enforcement by 30%, and for compliance monitoring by 35%. Meanwhile, in the Justice Department's FY26 budget request, DOJ leadership proposed cutting 59 attorneys from across ENRD, helping toxic polluters by stripping the EPA of its DOJ lawyers. The effects are already being felt. EPA and DOJ have brought three judicial enforcement cases in federal court since January 20th, putting it on a pace to file maybe 7 by the end of the fiscal year. By comparison, even the first Trump administration filed 80 civil judicial enforcement complaints and opened 115 environmental crime cases during the 2017 fiscal year. Appointing a MAGA zealot to run an office as important as OECA only makes sense if your plan is to torpedo that office from within. I hope Mr. Hall, in his position, can convince me that I am wrong, but you can understand why recent history leaves me very skeptical. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you, Senator Whitehouse. And I'm going to do a brief introduction of the nominees, swear you in, and then we'll have your statements. So as I mentioned in my opening statement, Katherine Scarlett currently serves as Chief of Staff for the Council of Environmental Quality. Katherine, before returning to CEQ, was a senior professional staff member of mine here on this committee and was a skilled staffer handling permitting, NEPA, wildlife, and economic development issues, along with educating this senator here, which is no small task. She brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to CEQ through her many years in both the executive and the legislative branches, so it's nice to have you back and have you before us. Our second nominee under consideration this morning is Jeffrey Hall, nominated to be Assistant Administrator of EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. Mr. Hall is currently a Senior Advisor at the EPA under Administrator Zeldin. Before joining that agency, he worked in private practice, and before that was a trial attorney for the Department of Justice. He has litigated at every level of the federal judiciary with a variety of issues, so we welcome you, Mr. Hall. We're glad to have you. Before we go to opening statements from the nominees, I'll now administer the oath for your sworn statement. So if you'll both rise and raise your right hand and answer the following question. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give to this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative, so we will now hear from the nominees. Thank you. Katherine, when you're ready, please proceed to your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and members of the committee. Thank you for holding today's hearing. I'm honored to appear before you today as President Trump's nominee for Chairman of the Council on Environmental Quality. I would like to thank my friends and colleagues who are here today, and most importantly, my husband, Brian, and my parents, Gail and Dallas. I also want to thank my 2 children, Rachel and Jack, who, after much debate and failed practice, we've decided to leave at daycare today. From a young age, I've been privileged to experience this nation's vast beauty, from growing up playing baseball in sandlots in Grandview Heights, Ohio, traveling coast to coast with my college marching band, to honeymooning in the nation's breathtaking national parks in Utah, and now watching my husband teach our children to set crab traps on the Chesapeake Bay. I know that we're blessed with a bountiful heartland and magnificent national parks, rivers, mountains, and coastlines. Over the last 8 years, I've worked in a variety of roles focusing on environmental policy and permitting. My first role at CEQ as Special Assistant marked my entry into public service, and ever since then, I have remained dedicated to serving the American people. I moved into a policy role at CEQ in 2018 as Deputy Associate Director for Infrastructure In 2020, I joined the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council as its first chief of staff. And for 4 years, I've had the honor of working as professional staff for this committee before taking on my current role as CEQ chief of staff. My preparation for this role comes in large part from my experience at this committee. In those 4 years, I worked on a number of bipartisan bills that became law, including the Surface Transportation Reauthorization, the Economic Development Reauthorization, and America's Conservation Enhancement Act of 2024. EPW has a reputation for working in a bipartisan manner and passing legislation unanimously out of committee. We worked across the aisle to turn ideas into bills and bills into laws, and I appreciate how those laws are rooted in the hard work of members and staff on both sides of the dais before me now. I'm a better public servant for being a part of this process, and I'm honored to be here today before the committee, to which I owe so much. CEQ has a critical role providing guidance on the implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act. NEPA provides a national policy to create and maintain the conditions under which man and nature can exist in productive harmony. Because of my experience, I recognize that environmental review and permitting processes affect every aspect of our nation, from roads and bridges and habitat conservation projects to critical energy infrastructure and national security installations. If confirmed as chairman, I commit to leading the interagency process to advance these policies and ensure efficient and consistent environmental reviews across agencies. Over the years, I've been afforded the opportunity to watch CEQ make incredible progress towards lasting permitting reform. For example, when I started at CEQ, agencies often had little to no awareness of the categorical exclusions established by other agencies. These CEs were buried in the Code of Federal Regulations or guidance documents, and in some cases were not publicly available at all. As a special assistant, I helped create a CE catalog, identifying each federal agency's CEs in a simple Excel spreadsheet. In this administration, CEQ is now implementing presidential and congressional directives to leverage modern technology and improve the process. As part of this renewed effort, CEQ recently launched the CE Explorer. This online tool, derived from the original CE spreadsheet, will help improve the environmental review process, allowing agencies and stakeholders to easily search and identify categorical exclusions that apply to their projects. This is the type of lasting impact I hope to oversee if confirmed to lead CEQ. In closing, I believe that efficient and consistent decision-making and robust environmental reviews are not mutually exclusive, but that work can be done to harmonize and advance these objectives. If confirmed, I commit to working with this committee, Congress as a whole, and the public on these important goals. I will work very hard to leverage this nation's environmental policies and technologies to grow our economy while ensuring that every American has clean air, clean water, and clean land. Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to your questions and working with you on these important issues should I be confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Good morning, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and distinguished members of this committee. It is my honor to appear before you today as President Trump's nominee for Assistant Administrator for the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance at the Environmental Protection Agency. I want to thank President Trump for the confidence he has placed in me and Administrator Zeldin for his support of my nomination. I am joined today by my wife and parents. I want to thank my family and those who have supported me in prior roles and now in my nomination. And I want to especially thank my wife, who has supported me through public service and career transitions with all the attendant challenges while raising our 3 children. Our third was born less than 2 weeks before I began at EPA, so her sacrifices made all of this possible. I want to thank God for his faithfulness. I would not be here were it not for his providence in blessing me with this opportunity and immeasurably greater grace. My career began with public service, and I have spent most of it as a civil servant. I have now served across 4 presidential administrations, primarily in the Department of Justice. Even before I began my career, I anticipated that a substantial portion of it would be public service. My father was a career civil servant for 50 years. While growing up, I was interested in science and wanted to use it to protect America, though I never envisioned doing so at EPA. Through my studies in public policy and in law school, I began thinking seriously about optimal regulatory enforcement, though I never thought I would oversee it. I've now spent over a decade handling federal enforcement cases and defending federal agency action. Through this, I have reflected on the meaning of public service. It is an honorable enterprise when undertaken with the right motives,
as many who spend their careers thanklessly improving this nation demonstrate. But exercising federal power is a great responsibility. As a prosecutor, I sought to take people's freedom and property by force of law. In defending clients, I've seen the human cost of weaponized prosecution, and there's no shortage of necessary but difficult tasks left undone in government. I therefore understand the great weight of responsibility placed before me through this nomination. I bring the broad background of my experience in civil and criminal enforcement and environmental law to EPA's Enforcement Office. I had the privilege of already serving as the acting head of that office before my nomination. From the start, I told everyone that we would continue to enforce the law, holding bad actors accountable while promoting compliance and cooperative federalism. The skilled and dedicated staff at EPA have the knowledge and expertise to accomplish this. At the same time, I recognize the valid concerns about the priorities of the previous administration that distracted from and undermined the core work of enforcing the environmental laws that Congress has passed. But now, there is tremendous opportunity to oversee a great American comeback, and EPA enforcement is a critical piece of that strategy. As President Trump works to bring industry back to America and reestablish energy dominance, we must ensure that third world pollution does not follow. We are still paying the price of America's first unrestricted industrialization and Superfund sites around the country that burden the public fisc. Also, we must prevent foreign entities from sending toxins here and profiting off of destroying America. Federal enforcement is necessary to vindicate the distinctly federal interest and protect these United States, even as we empower states to protect their own citizens. To reorient environmental enforcement toward this positive vision, if confirmed, I will ensure that EPA enforcement will be guided by noble values. There will be clarity as we identify the best reading of statutes and regulations. There will be visibility into our decision-making as we revise old policies. There will be consistency across the regions and with the rule of law and the constitutional structure. We will achieve efficiency by focusing on clear violations while refusing to procrastinate on difficult decisions. And if confirmed, I will ensure that there is accountability for each official to embody these values. I've had the opportunity to visit some of your states and regions since joining EPA, and I've had I greatly appreciated the opportunity to learn about unique challenges facing each through discussions with you and your staff and state regulators. And I reaffirm my desire to enforce the environmental laws. I want to keep my children healthy and leave them a clean environment and a bright future. Thank you, Chairman Capito and Ranking Member Whitehouse, for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to our discussion and welcome any questions committee members may have.
Thank you. Before I begin my questions, I just have 3 yes or no questions that I ask standardly. So I'm going to ask these, and if you could both respond. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear before the committee or designated members of this committee and other appropriate committees of this Congress to provide information subject to appropriate and necessary security protections with respect to your responsibilities?
I do.
Yes. Do you agree to ensure that testimony, briefings, documents, and electronic and other forms of communications of information are provided to this committee and its staff and other appropriate committees in a timely manner?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you. And finally, do you know of any matters which you may or may not have disclosed that may place you in a conflict of interest if you are confirmed?
No.
Good. Okay. I'm going to start with questions. I'm going to start with Katherine Scarlett first. You've held significant positions in the federal government relating to NEPA, so you know this well, and permitting processes. In each of these roles, you've developed experience of what's working and what isn't. So, given your expertise, what has motivated you to take on this role, and how has your past experience prepared you for this?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Capito. I was excited to take on this role mainly because all 3 branches of the federal government recently have indicated that the NEPA process is broken and needs to be reformed. As I stated in my opening statement, I have spent nearly the last decade working on the interagency process and trying to get the environmental review process more efficient and more timely. So given the directive of Congress, I wanted to return to CEQ so that I could faithfully implement those amendments to the National Environmental Policy Act.
Well, I think response of all 3 branches being dissatisfied with where we've been and where we are, we need certainty more than anything. And I know with you at the helm, we can get some of that. Let me ask you a subsequent question. In Division C, Title III of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, Congress passed the first large-scale bipartisan changes to NEPA in almost 30 years. However, it is widely viewed that the previous administration did not faithfully implement the changes in NEPA included in Division C, Title III of that law. As members in both chambers and both political parties continue to seek reforms to support more efficient environmental reviews, will you commit to faithfully implementing, this is important, I think, to both sides of the dais here, any additional permitting and environmental review reforms passed into law consistent with the statutory language and the intent of Congress?
Yes, Chairman, I do commit to faithfully implementing any new provisions passed by Congress.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hall, my ranking member took you to task pretty good in his opening statement, I would say. But one of the statements that he made, I just wanted to give you a chance to respond, because he mentioned that your wish would be for it to make it easier for the polluters to pollute. Is that a true statement in your opinion?
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to respond to that, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you earlier. No, that is not a true statement. As I mentioned in my opening statement, when I first day on the job, well, the second day, I actually had an all-staff meeting with all of OECA and told them that it was my goal to continue to enforce the law and that we would continue to enforce it. And I think the record bears that out. And the administrator, when he had his hearing on the budget, was able to share some statistics that show that OECA and EPA have continued to enforce the law. So I'm happy to get into those, but I think they show, for instance, on civil case conclusions, that there are far more in this the time of this administration than the previous time of last year. And on the criminal side, there are also some very compelling statistics that show there have been 4 more case conclusions, including sentencing and criminal penalties during the time of this administration.
Yeah, let me ask you about the Superfund cleanups, because you mentioned this in your opening statement, and how to improve. We've spent a lot of time trying to improve the CERCLA implementation. We have some Superfund sites in our. You mentioned they're on the books. I'm sure you do too. On the books for years, and never quite seem to get there. Will you have a direct role in negotiating these agreements, and how would you approach the use of these tools to accelerate our cleanups?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So Superfund enforcement is a priority of this administration, of the administrator, of the deputy administrator, on down to me when I was the acting assistant administrator, and if confirmed, would continue to be a major priority of my tenure. So I think that we would use all of the tools available. I know that this committee had a hearing not too long ago on Superfund and Superfund enforcement, where some of those tools were discussed, including various agreements like mixed funding agreements. So I think that we would continue to use all of the tools available and push it forward. I know the Office of Land and Emergency Management has a goal of expediting cleanup, and my commitment would be for OECA to be right there with them, increasing the pace of remediation and making sure that the Superfund program is funded through appropriate and aggressive enforcement.
Coming from a state much like Ohio, where we were basically major parts of the Industrial Revolution, major manufacturing sites that are now have gone dormant and are really ripe for economic development, but cannot get through the environmental, the Superfund, if they've been designated. This is extremely important to really the heartland of the country that powered this nation and really brought us to where we are today, to be able to be part of the new revolution of technology and other things that are coming, and advanced manufacturing. So I appreciate your attention, and I'll turn to the ranking member.
I'm running late for a meeting with the leader and with a delegation from Great Britain, so I'm going to have to ask my questions via QFR. Mr. Hall, I hope you will be responsive and provide the documents that I request, particularly regarding the investigation into GEO, which on its face appears to be a service provided to a significant Trump donor that previously employed the Attorney General. So documents that explain how and why that decision was reached, emails between EPA and the White House and DOJ, I think are all relevant to dispelling what seems to be the most evident Occam's razor conclusion about what took place here, which is that a political favor was delivered to a significant campaign donor and former employer of the Attorney General. Thank you.
Well, if I'd known you could have gone first. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right.
I should have told you.
Okay. Senator Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to be with you today. I think it's fair to say CEQ and EPA play a pretty significant role in what's happening in Utah, particularly with energy development. Thank you both for taking the time to come see me in my office. Ms. Scarlett, I'll begin with you. Little bias, you honeymooned in Utah. We feel a connection with you. Mr. Hall, I try to beat that. But I also feel like CEQ touches directly on some really urgent priorities for Utah, and I'll start with wildfire management. We're experiencing, the West is experiencing, just the whole place feels like it's on fire. Interagency cooperation is just really critical. I'm really proud to work with my colleague, Senator Padilla, on Fix Our Forests Act, which emphasizes this interagency cooperation. In your role at CEQ, how can you ensure that there are no lapses in communication or responsibility among the federal agencies, particularly when it comes to wildfire mitigation?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for the meeting. I really enjoyed our conversation I think it was just last week. CEQ at its core is about interagency coordination, which is a very complicated process, and it doesn't always go the way it is supposed to, but I'm dedicated and committing to make sure that in this administration, the agencies are communicating actively in person and virtually at all levels of the administration, from down in the field up into the headquarters offices, and any role that CEQ can play in ensuring that that process goes smoothly, we will absolutely be doing so.
Thank you. And I'd point out, particularly when it comes to a wildfire, it's so time sensitive. Decisions that are made are very, very time sensitive. In my capacity as chair of the subcommittee on chemical safety, waste management, environmental justice, and regulatory oversight, I also have the direct jurisdiction over CEQ and, by extension, NEPA. I'd like to be really clear. Utahns whose communities are rapidly expanding and whose economy depends on predictable, timely decisions, NEPA delays are devastating and very frustrating. They create unnecessary barriers for everything from housing to infrastructure, energy development. Can you talk about what steps you'll take to ensure all the agencies involved have actually the right technology and capacity to make timely decisions?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Senator. We are actively working with agencies on updating their agency-specific NEPA procedures to be responsive to the directive from Congress and the Fiscal Responsibility Act amendments. Specifically, Congress imposed a 2-year time limit for EISs, a 1-year time limit for EAs. So we are working to establish a very disciplined process with the agencies so that they can achieve those timelines.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, thank you also for visiting my office. Utah is very grateful to the administrator. Please pass on our appreciation for his interest in our issues there. His visit and engagement have been really significant. As you know, we have these very unique air quality challenges in Utah, especially in regions where we have these basins like the Uinta Basin, where ozone issues are very complex. They're not just as simple as they are in other places. And I believe the oil and gas producers in Utah have really stepped up. They've tried to mitigate these as much as they can, and oftentimes they've used innovation or ways to deal with this that have not been recognized by the previous administration, and in some cases actually penalized. So if confirmed, how do you plan to recognize and support producers who are proactively using innovation and ways to accomplish this that haven't fit necessarily in the exact squared boxes?
Thank you, Senator, for that question, because it is one of the main goals of this administration to advance energy dominance, and so oil and gas producers are critical. When I was acting assistant administrator, I made sure to hold them account, but also to not hinder appropriate investment and development of energy resources. And that's why we put out the National Enforcement Compliance Initiative revision to make sure that that happened. In terms of recognizing those unique investments and productive ways in which they're going about complying with the law. I want to make sure that we take all of that into account if confirmed. We would look at that, and there's a couple different ways that can occur. One is through just pushing cooperative federalism, because the states are in a better position often to know exactly what's occurring on these. And so the federal government should not get in the way of the state dealing with those regulated communities if they're doing a good job. And that's what cooperative federalism means. But also focus on clear violations to make sure that when you're actually going after somebody, it is an important violation that actually impacts a community and harms it. And I think focusing on clear violations that are actual significant violations of the law is critical to making sure that the good actors like you're talking about are not unduly impacted.
Thank you. And of course, we invite both of you to Utah to come see firsthand what we're doing. Appreciate it. I yield my time.
Thank you. Senator Schiff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hall, I want to know how EPA and DOJ came to the conclusion to drop the agency's complaint against GEO, a contractor that operates the ICE facility in Adelanto, California. My staff have personally visited this facility because Congress has a fundamental role in conducting oversight of private entities that receive federal contracts and awards. During the last administration, EPA found that the company had violated the law 1,137 times by failing to provide employees with personal protective equipment. The pesticide chemical known as HALT comes with a warning that says, quote, causes irreversible eye damage and skin burns, harmful if swallowed or absorbed through the skin. Do not get in eyes, on skin, or on clothing. The private prison company was facing $4 million in fines under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act for irresponsible use of a chemical disinfectant that is hazardous to human health. But your agency dropped the case. A former EPA enforcement official called the Trump administration's choice to drop the case a, quote, complete surrender. So I want to know what happened here. The facility is in my state, and I want to know why the EPA completely surrendered to this private prison company after a change in administration. So let me begin with one question. Are you aware that GEO Group gave President Trump's super PAC $1 million and contributed $500,000 to his inauguration?
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to address that. And Ranking Member Whitehouse raised it in my meeting with him, so I'm prepared to walk through it. I do want to say up front, I was not involved in the decision-making. It was purely an EPA case because it was an administrative case going to an administrative adjudication. I am aware of that fact, or the general nature of those facts, not the specific dollar amounts now, based on reporting by ProPublica after the case had already been decided to be dismissed. And honestly, that's how I came to awareness of those facts.
You became, just for clarity, you became aware of this from the ProPublica report after the decision was made.
Yes, Senator.
But do you know whether those who were involved in making the decision were aware that GEO was a major contributor to the tune of $1.5 million to President Trump or his committees?
The decision was made by career management officials, and to my knowledge, they were not aware of any of those facts, nor did they enter the decision-making for that case.
And do you know whether the White House had any communication with those responsible for the dismissal of the case?
I do not specifically know, but I do not believe they did.
And what is the basis of your speculation that you don't believe that they did? How would you know?
Because I have talked with the career management officials. They didn't indicate that there was any other influence, and that was purely decided by those career management officials.
Okay, well, having talked with them, did you discuss the president's the contribution by the company to the president?
I mentioned the fact that that there was a ProPublica article on it, and they indicated that the career management official making that decision indicated he was not aware of it.
So the person who made the decision to dismiss the case claimed to you that he had no knowledge that GEO was a major contributor to the president or his committees.
That is my understanding.
Well, you said you had this conversation, so I don't want to ask your understanding. Is that what this person told you?
Yes.
And what is your view of the EPA dropping this case? What's the basis for this?
So thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to discuss that, because I think it's important to be able to explain that. The career management officials that took a look at this took a look at the facts and the law. And so on the law, they took a look at the legal risk, including to the FIFRA enforcement program from proceeding with the case on an administrative hearing, as well as the facts and the equities, and they appropriately decided to dismiss it. I think there was three, so in my understanding of just how I think about the case, I think there were three critical points. One is that the case was only about whether or not the gloves that were used by those employees were labeled consistently with the disinfectant, not whether or not anybody was harmed. That was not part of the FIFRA administrative adjudication case. Second, GEO Group had on its own gone out and gotten an independent laboratory to assess whether or not those gloves were protective and found that it was, and they had an expert witness willing to testify at the administrative hearing to that fact. And three, there was an article in the National Law Review that just came out yesterday indicating that EPA enforcement has not only continued but stepped up against antimicrobial products that are mislabeled or unregistered. And I think those are the ones that are harmful.
And if I could, one more question, Madam Chair. 1,137 violations. This wasn't as if there was a single episode or single use of a glove. Over what period of time were those 1,137 violations? And doesn't that indicate a pattern practice of willful disregard of the law?
Senator, my understanding, based on the complaint in the administrative case and not based on anything else, is that it occurred sometime between 2021 and 2023, and that was just based on the fact that the gloves were used routinely in cleanings. And no, I don't think it demonstrates a pattern or practice of willful disregard of the law, because again, the key question was whether or not those gloves were appropriate and for use with that disinfectant. And I think that was a contested factual issue, and I think it was appropriate that enforcement resources were not used to continue to prosecute that case.
I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
if-
Thank you.
Yeah, I just got to say, though, that to dismiss this case in light of the vast contributions and in contradiction to the efforts that were made in the previous administration does look like a complete surrender to me. And I hope you will respond to the document inquiries that were made by Sheldon Whitehouse. Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Husted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Scarlett, to someone with Ohio ties, I have an Ohio conversation that I want to have with you regarding ozone attainment in the Cleveland area. And I think you may know that in the early 1990s, Ohio implemented a program in the Cleveland area called E-Check. And this is designed to do tailpipe testing to mitigate emissions that would contribute to their lack of attainment of the ozone standard. And it is, and over time, the EPA keeps jacking up the standard, making it harder to attain. But over time, I think this is a great example of things that frustrate people about some regulations, is that it stayed in place. It costs the state and the consumer $14 million a year approximately. And it's an example of something that maybe made sense at one time in the 1990s, has stayed on the books. Emissions from automobiles are cleaner. Many automobiles are electric these days, yet the program goes on. It seemingly had no impact on the standard, the attaining emission standards, because Cleveland is being considered for upgrading from moderate to serious non-attainment. And it's just an example of, like, a regulation gets on the books, a program gets mandated, yet it lives through its life. It doesn't have a lot of impact on improving the overall environmental quality. Yet here it still is, $14 more million a year, the inconvenience of having. Could you just offer some thoughts on that, and would you commit to working with us in Ohio to see if there isn't a better way to do this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Husted. Thank you for our meeting last week as well. I love meeting any fellow Ohioans. That matter is not necessarily within the purview of CEQ, but related. I would like to, talk a little bit about NEPA and how we are kind of applying an approach to a similar statute. When NEPA was passed, the world was vastly different. We have more technology, more resources, more knowledge. So under this administration, we're working hard to take a hard look at the statute and what's required of it. In doing so, we found, agency procedures that date back to the 80s, then are layered with guidance and field memos and decision memos. So we're really trying to work within the NEPA process to consolidate the guidance, have a clear directive that's really disciplined and follows the statute. And I think that that's something the agencies across this administration are going to be looking at when it comes to regulatory reform. And I'm absolutely happy to be a part of any conversation that I can be helpful with to you in the state of Ohio.
Well, thank you. Yes, whether it's whether it's a program like eCheck or NEPA or other things, there are just laws, rules, regulations, compliance standards get on the books, technology changes, but yet the rules and regulations remain the same, even if they don't make sense to the modern, to impact the modern challenges that are before us. So thank you for your willingness to help. I did mention this to you in our conversation and mentioned it to you before the hearing today. I just would like your thoughts, because I hear from people in Ohio who say, hey, we have Army Corps issues, 3 different areas. Is it possible in your role you can help us sort this out and help Ohio have one point of contact for all the issues that we interact with the Army Corps?
Thank you, Senator. CEQ doesn't have any authority in terms of drawing lines for regional districts. However, I am happy to facilitate any conversations that need to happen with the Army Corps to improve the process for your state and all states.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's just you do have an important role where you're in the conversation about how all of these things work in our world. And these are things that, when I talk to the head of the EPA in Ohio, that they just bring up as problems that, they expect us to sort out. They don't, I know when we're in Washington, people talk about whose jurisdiction is it. For them, they just want to get these problems fixed. And so I appreciate your willingness to help us navigate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Markey. He's already questioned.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hall, do you commit to not allowing any enforcement actions to be dropped or softened for political reasons? Yes or no?
I commit to following the law and the rule of law and to acting impartially in all cases, including on decisions whether or not to dismiss actions.
So you're saying that you will not drop any cases for political reasons. Is that what you're saying?
It depends on what you mean, Senator. If you mean for policy considerations, those are absolutely appropriate to be made both in enforcement and in the regulatory context. If you're talking about partiality to parties, that will not impact my decision-making.
Well, obviously, very clearly, you should just be saying that our laws exist to protect our air, our water, our land. They're not optional, depending on how the president feels that day for political reasons. That should be your answer. I'm not hearing it. Mr. Hall, if directed by EPA leadership or the White House to turn a blind eye to violations of environmental laws, would you comply?
Senator, again, it's going to depend on the context. If you mean a blind eye and to not enforcing the law appropriately, I will enforce the law appropriately. There are many circumstances in which we enforce the law in different ways. The core goal is to bring entities into compliance, not to just take enforcement actions for that goal.
Okay, again, this question should be a gimme as well. If they ask you to break the law, if you just have to say no. Doesn't matter if you don't think it'll ever happen. That should make it even easier for you to say that you will not do it, No is actually a complete sentence. There's no reason to play politics with our clean air, our clean water, our health. Mr. Hall, will you commit to cooperating with Congress and the EPA Inspector General in any investigations of allegations of political interference, suppression of staff, findings, or unlawful weakening of enforcement? Yes or no?
I will work with Congress and OIG as is lawful, yes.
Yeah, and again, you should be able to easily agree to participate in investigations, especially if you are able to stand by your agency's actions. Mr. Hall, if EPA staff resist or report inappropriate political interference in enforcement cases, would you protect your own staff from retaliation if there is inappropriate political interference in their work?
Senator, I would follow the law, including protecting them from retaliation for any unlawful reason.
And that's excellent, because Korea EPA staff who work to protect our environment should be safe from political retaliation. Unfortunately, we've already seen that this is not the case in the Trump administration. 144 EPA employees were recently suspended after they used their First Amendment rights to express concern that the Trump administration was politicizing the EPA and preventing it from carrying out its mission to protect the public health. Mr. Hall, do you think it was appropriate to suspend EPA employees for using their constitutional rights? Yes or no?
Senator, that's not my understanding of what happened. I wasn't involved in the decision-making on that, and it's also an active investigation, so I'm not going to comment beyond saying that I don't think that's a fair characterization.
I appreciate that, but on that, you're wrong. Mr. Hall, if confirmed, would you follow the Hatch Act?
Yes,
To be
Senator.
more explicit, Mr. Hall, if confirmed, would you attack Democratic lawmakers in writing using agency resources?
It is not my intention to do that, Senator.
Well, unfortunately, we have already seen that happen at Trump's EPA, since Administrator Zeldin apparently thinks being a troll through political mail is an appropriate use of agency resources. I don't see how that's illegal or efficient use of taxpayer money. I would hope that you would agree, but I know that you're not going to be able to say that publicly right now. If it did reflect your views, although I'm not sure that it does. So obviously, there is a massive politicization which is taking place at the EPA. It's going to endanger our air, our water, and our lands. We're going to see vast amounts of pollution going up into the atmosphere because of AI. There has to be 80,000 new megawatts of electricity installed every year for the next 10 years. 80,000 a year. And the wind and solar tax breaks have now been killed. And unfortunately, as people move over to fossil fuels, it first won't be sufficient. And second, that which is put in place is just going to pollute the air. And there's going to be a tax on Americans. And that tax will be in new cancers, in new asthmas that were avoidable. And the EPA is going to wind up being complicit in that crime against the health of not just our planet, but the lives and lungs and health of Americans in our country. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Well, I mentioned it's a very busy day, and so with no further questions, I would like to thank both of you for being here and your families, and all my colleagues for participation in today's hearings. Senators who wish to submit written questions for the record have until 5 p.m. Wednesday, August the 6th, to do so, and I believe the ranking member said he was going to be doing that. The nominees' responses to those questions are due back to the committee no later than 5 p.m. on Wednesday, August the 20th, and will be submitted for the record. With that, this hearing is adjourned, and thank you both very much.